My name is Audrey, and at 58 years old, I never expected to face my own daughter across an auction room floor. As Katherine sat there, paddle in hand, laughing at another bidder's defeat, the words cut through me. Say goodbye to your house. She had no idea I was sitting in the back row, ready to fight for the home where I raised her, the home she planned to demolish for profit. If you could have seen her face when I raised my paddle. Let me know where you're watching from, and don't forget to like and subscribe as I tell you what happened next when I won back my family home. I should start from the beginning to help you understand how things fell apart between Katherine and me. Life wasn't always this complicated. For 25 years, William and I built a beautiful life in our colonial-style home in the suburbs of Boston. The house sat on a corner lot with tall oak trees that turned brilliant shades of orange and red every fall. William had planted those trees himself the year we moved in, saying they would grow alongside our family. Our home wasn't extravagant, but it was perfect for us. 3 bedrooms, a cozy living room with a stone fireplace, and a kitchen where we spent countless hours talking about our days while preparing meals. The backyard had a garden where I grew tomatoes and cucumbers in the summer, and a small patio where we hosted barbecues for neighbors and friends. Most importantly, it was where Katherine took her first steps, celebrated birthdays, and grew from a curious little girl into a young woman. I worked as a financial director for a real estate development company while William taught history at the local high school. We weren't wealthy, but we managed our finances carefully and always made sure Katherine had everything she needed. I still remember rushing home from work to make it to her soccer games and dance recitals, sometimes still wearing my business suit. William was always the more relaxed parent, while I tended to worry about everything from Katherine's grades to whether she was eating enough vegetables. Katherine was our only child born after several heartbreaking miscarriages. Perhaps that's why we both doted on her so much. She had William's dark curly hair and my green eyes, and from an early age, she showed a remarkable determination. When she was 8, she decided to sell lemonade to save for a bicycle. While most children would have given up after a day or two, Katherine set up her stand every weekend for an entire summer until she had enough money. I was so proud of her persistence. Our family routine included Sunday dinners where we would discuss our week summer vacations to Cape Cod and holiday traditions that Katherine loved. William was the storyteller in the family, often regaling us with historical tales or family anecdotes that had Katherine giggling into her mashed potatoes. Those were happy years, filled with the ordinary moments that I now realize were actually extraordinary. Everything changed 10 years ago when William complained about chest pain one evening after dinner. I thought it was just indigestion, but insisted we go to the emergency room anyway. He died of a massive heart attack that night, leaving a void in our lives that nothing could fill. Katherine was 22 and had just graduated from college with a business degree. I was 48 and suddenly a widow. William's death devastated us both, but it also affected us differently. I withdrew into myself, focusing on keeping our home running and maintaining my job despite my grief. Katherine threw herself into starting her career as if working could keep the pain at bay. I thought we were both just coping in our own ways, but looking back, I can see that's when the distance between us began to grow. After William's death, I struggled financially. His life insurance helped with immediate expenses, but it wasn't enough for the long term. I had taken early retirement from my position to care for him during his last few years when his health had begun to decline before the heart attack. He had developed high blood pressure and diabetes, requiring more medical appointments and care. It was a decision I never regretted, but it did impact our financial security. 2 years ago, I made the difficult decision to sell our family home. Property taxes had increased, and the maintenance of an aging house was becoming too much for me to handle on my reduced income. When I told Katherine about my decision, I hoped she would understand. Instead, she seemed almost indifferent, suggesting I should have managed our finances better. That hurt more than I let on at the time. The day I signed the papers to sell our home was one of the hardest days of my life. Each room held memories, the height marks on the kitchen doorframe showing Katherine's growth, the small dent in the living room wall from when she had tried to move furniture during her redecorating phase as a teenager, the garden bench where William and I had spent so many evenings watching the sunset. I walked through each room one last time, saying goodbye to 25 years of life lived within those walls. I had no idea then that I would be fighting to buy back this same house at an auction less than 2 years later, or that my opponent would be my own daughter. The changes in Katherine happened gradually after college, but became more pronounced after she met Marcus during a business convention in Chicago. She had always been ambitious, but her focus shifted entirely to financial success. The daughter who once sold lemonade to buy a bicycle was now determined to become wealthy at any cost. Marcus came from a wealthy family and had started his own real estate development company in his mid-20s. Tall, always impeccably dressed, and with a charisma that drew people to him, he swept Katherine off her feet. When she brought him home to meet me for the first time, something about his smile never quite reached his eyes. He complimented our home, but I caught him appraising it like a property to flip rather than a place where people had built their lives. "You could get at least 30% more for this place with the right renovations," he told me over dinner. "These older neighborhoods are gold mines if you know how to market them to the right buyers." I smiled politely, but felt uncomfortable with the way he viewed our home as nothing more than an investment opportunity. Katherine, however, hung on his every word and seemed impressed by his business acumen. They married after dating for just 6 months. The wedding was lavish, held at an exclusive country club with hundreds of guests, most of whom I had never met. Katherine wore a designer dress that cost more than my car, and the whole affair felt like a networking event rather than a celebration of love. I tried to be happy for her, but I couldn't help wondering if she was marrying Marcus or the lifestyle he represented. After the wedding, our relationship began to deteriorate further. Our weekly phone calls became monthly, then occasional. Katherine was busy building her new life with Marcus, including starting their own real estate company together. When we did talk, she would boast about their latest deals and acquisitions, but rarely asked about my life. The first major argument came during Thanksgiving 3 years ago. Katherine and Marcus had agreed to come for dinner, but called the morning of to cancel, saying a business opportunity had come up that they couldn't miss. I had spent 2 days preparing all of Katherine's favorite foods, including William's special recipe for pecan pie that she had loved since childhood. "Mom, you need to understand that in our business, timing is everything," she explained over the phone. "This property just came on the market, and if we don't move now, someone else will snatch it up." "It's Thanksgiving, Katherine. Can't the property wait until tomorrow?" I asked, trying to hide my disappointment. "That's the problem with your generation," she replied dismissively. "You don't understand how competitive the market is now. This is why you ended up having to sell your house." Her words stung more than she knew. I had never talked to her about the financial struggles I faced after her father's death, not wanting to burden her. But her assumption that I had to sell our home due to incompetence rather than circumstance revealed how little she understood my situation. Christmas that year wasn't any better. Katherine and Marcus went to Aspen for a ski vacation instead of visiting. Then they missed William's death anniversary, Katherine claiming she had forgotten the date. Each absence felt like another brick in the wall growing between us. What troubled me most was hearing rumors about their business practices. Boston is a relatively small community in the real estate world, and I still had contacts from my previous career. Former colleagues would mention the Hartwell Ross Group, named after Katherine and Marcus's surnames with concerned expressions. They're buying up properties in neighborhoods where people are struggling with foreclosures. My friend Diane told me over coffee, putting pressure on owners to sell below market value before they even list their homes. I didn't want to believe it, but when I gently questioned Katherine about their methods, she became defensive. "It's just business, Mom. We're providing solutions for people who need to sell quickly. Not everyone has the luxury of waiting around for the perfect offer." "But are you offering them fair prices?" I asked. "We offer what makes sense for our business model," she replied coolly. "If they don't like it, they don't have to sell to us." After selling our family home, I moved into a small 2-bedroom apartment closer to downtown. It was a major adjustment after so many years in our house, but I made it cozy with some of our old furniture and William's books. The community was lively with a small park nearby where I started taking daily walks. I made new friends, joined a book club, and even began volunteering at a local food pantry. My life became simpler but meaningful. I learned to live on less and found joy in small pleasures: morning coffee on my tiny balcony, weekend visits to the farmer's market, and occasional dinners with friends. Katherine visited my new place exactly once, looking around with barely concealed disdain. "This is cozy," she said in a tone that made it clear she meant cramped and inadequate. "It suits me," I replied. "Not everyone needs a 5-bedroom house and a 3-car garage to be happy." She flinched slightly at my words, but quickly recovered. "Well, if you ever want to upgrade, let me know. Marcus and I could find you something better." What Katherine didn't know was that despite my modest living arrangement, I wasn't as financially vulnerable as she assumed. William had been cautious with money and had set up a separate insurance policy that I hadn't touched saving it for true emergencies. I also had a small portfolio of investments that provided some additional income. I lived simply by choice, not just by necessity. As Catherine became more absorbed in her wealthy lifestyle and questionable business practices, I worried about the values she seemed to be abandoning. What happened to the compassionate girl who once organized a fundraiser for a classmate whose family lost their home in a fire? Where was the young woman who volunteered at animal shelters during college? Marcus's influence seemed to be bringing out the worst in her, and I felt increasingly powerless to reach her. Little did I know that the ultimate test of our relationship was yet to come, and it would center around the very home where she had grown up. The first sign of trouble came when Catherine called me out of the blue one afternoon. We hadn't spoken in nearly 3 weeks, so I was surprised to hear her voice. "Mom, I've been thinking," she began with the tone she used when trying to pitch an idea. "Marcus and I are looking to expand our property portfolio in your old neighborhood. Actually, we were wondering if you'd be interested in selling us your old house." I was confused. "Catherine, I don't own the house anymore. I sold it 2 years ago, remember?" "I know that," she said impatiently. "But we've been keeping an eye on it, and the current owners are underwater on their mortgage. They'll probably have to sell soon or face foreclosure. We thought we could approach them with an offer, but I wanted to check if you had any objections first." I was stunned by the casual way she discussed someone else's financial hardship. "These people are losing their home, and you're seeing it as a business opportunity." "Mom, this is what we do. If we don't buy it, someone else will. At least this way it stays in the family in a sense." "What would you do with the house if you bought it?" I asked, though I feared I already knew the answer. There was a slight hesitation before Catherine replied. "Well, that location would be perfect for a small luxury development. The lot is large enough that we could potentially build 3 or 4 high-end townhouses." My heart sank. "You want to tear it down the house where you grew up?" "Mom, it's just a house, an old one at that. The real value is in the land and location. You need to be practical about these things." We argued for nearly an hour. I tried to explain that the house meant something to me beyond its market value, that the thought of it being demolished for luxury townhouses felt like erasing part of our family history. Catherine couldn't understand my attachment to bricks and mortar, as she called it. "I thought you'd be supportive of my business," she said finally, her voice cold. "I guess I was wrong." After that conversation, Catherine became even more distant. She stopped calling altogether, and my attempts to reach out were met with brief text responses or none at all. I sent a card for her birthday that received no acknowledgement, and when I invited her and Marcus for dinner, she claimed they were too busy with work. The final blow came about 3 months later. I was having coffee with my friend Diane, who still worked in real estate, when she mentioned something that made my blood run cold. "Did you hear the Hartwell Ross Group is going after that property on Maple Street, your old place? Apparently it's going up for auction next month. Bank foreclosure." I tried to keep my voice steady. "Are you sure?" Diane nodded. "The current owners lost their jobs in that tech company layoff last year. They tried to keep up with payments, but eventually fell too far behind. Catherine's company has been circling like vultures, from what I hear. They've been doing it all over the neighborhood." That evening, I did something I'm not proud of. I drove to the upscale restaurant where I knew Catherine and Marcus often had business dinners on Friday nights. I didn't go inside, but waited in my car across the street. When they emerged and headed to the parking garage, I followed at a distance. They went to their office building, lights still on despite the late hour. The security guard knew me from the days when I'd visit Catherine, so he let me in without question. I didn't go up to their floor, but waited in the lobby. Their voices carried from the stairwell as they descended deep in conversation. They stopped on the landing between floors, unaware of my presence below. "The auction is set for the 15th, Marcus was saying. "I've already spoken with Jefferson at the bank. He's given me the reserve price, so we know exactly how high we need to go." "Isn't that illegal?" Catherine asked, though she didn't sound particularly concerned. Marcus laughed. "Only if someone finds out. Besides, he owes me a favor after I helped his brother-in-law with that zoning issue last year." "What if other developers show up?" Catherine asked. "They won't bid high enough. We've been spreading rumors about structural issues with the property, and if anyone looks too interested, I have ways of discouraging them. They continued discussing their plans for the property after they acquired it. Katherine sounded excited as she detailed how they would demolish the house and maximize the lot with luxury townhomes. The profit margin will be incredible, she said enthusiastically. Those units will sell for at least $700,000 each, maybe more. And the best part is your mother will never know we were behind it, Marcus added. By the time the demolition starts, the property will be under our corporate name. I felt physically ill listening to them. Not just because of their plans for our family home, but because of the casual dishonesty in their business practices. The daughter I raised would never have participated in such schemes. William would have been heartbroken to hear her now. As I drove home that night, tears blurred my vision. The pain of Katherine's betrayal was almost physical. But beneath the hurt, a resolve was forming. I might have lost my daughter to greed and ambition, but I wasn't going to lose our family home as well. Not without a fight. Back in my apartment, I looked at the framed photo of William, Katherine, and me standing in front of our house the day we moved in. Katherine was just 4 years old, clutching her favorite teddy bear and beaming at the camera. William had his arm around my shoulders, his face full of hope for our future in that home. I won't let them tear it down, Will, I whispered to his image. I promise. I knew I was about to risk nearly everything I had left, but some things are worth fighting for, and sometimes the people we love need to be saved from themselves. With the auction only 2 weeks away, I had no time to waste. The first step was to assess my financial situation realistically. I withdrew my entire savings account statement and spread it across my kitchen table along with documents for my investments and William's insurance policy that I'd preserved all these years. The numbers were encouraging but not definitive. I had enough for a substantial down payment, but not enough to outbid Katherine and Marcus if they were determined to go high. I needed to be strategic. My first call was to Howard Barnes, a former colleague who had mentored me when I first entered the real estate field and now ran his own financial consultancy. Audrey, it's been too long, he greeted me warmly. How can I help thee? I explained the situation, including what I'd overheard about Katherine and Marcus's plans. Howard's voice grew serious. What they're doing with that bank insider is illegal, Audrey. That's auction fraud. I know, but I can't report my own daughter, Howard. I just need to stop them from getting the house. Howard sighed. Have you tried talking to Katherine directly? Making her understand what this house means to you? She's beyond reaching that way. She sees it as just another property now. After a pause, Howard said, Come to my office tomorrow. Let's look at your finances and see what we can do. Howard's assessment confirmed what I suspected. If I liquidated my investments and used the insurance money, I could make a competitive bid, but it would leave me with almost no financial safety net. At my age, that was a significant risk. There's something else you should know, Howard said, sliding a folder across his desk. I've been keeping an eye on the Hartwell-Ross Group. Their finances aren't as solid as they appear. Inside the folder were financial reports and news clippings about several of Katherine and Marcus's recent projects. 2 had gone significantly over budget and another was stalled due to permit issues. They had overextended themselves, leveraging one property to finance the next. They need this auction to go their way, Howard explained. From what my sources tell me, they've taken deposits on those townhouses they plan to build, but they don't actually have the capital to complete the project without selling units pre-construction. I felt a chill. So they're using other people's money to fund a project they don't even own the land for yet. Howard nodded grimly. If they don't secure your old property at the auction, they could be in serious trouble with their investors. Possibly even legal trouble. This explained their desperation, but it also gave me an advantage. They would be expecting to win the auction without significant competition thanks to their underhanded tactics. They wouldn't be prepared for a determined bidder with knowledge of the property's true value. Over the next week, I did my homework thoroughly. I researched recent sales in the neighborhood, got a private assessment of the property's value, and even drove by the house several times noting its condition. The current owners had made some nice improvements before their financial troubles began, which actually increased its value. I also reached out to a mortgage broker, securing pre-approval for a loan to supplement my cash reserves if needed. The interest rate wasn't ideal, but it would give me additional bidding power. 3 days before the auction, I met with a real estate attorney to ensure I understood all the legal aspects of the auction process. She advised me on the paperwork I'd need and warned me about potential pitfalls. Bring cashier's checks, not personal checks, she advised, and be prepared for immediate deposit requirements. Foreclosure auctions move quickly. The night before the auction, I could barely sleep. Doubts crept in during the dark hours. Was I making a mistake? Was I risking my financial future out of sentiment for a house? Or worse, was I doing this to spite Katherine rather than out of love? I got up and went to my small living room where I kept a photo album from our years in the house. I flipped through pages of Katherine's birthday parties, holiday gatherings, and ordinary moments that made up our family life. There was William teaching Katherine to ride a bike in the driveway, Katherine proudly displaying her science fair trophy in the kitchen, the three of us decorating the Christmas tree and the living room ornaments that I still kept carefully packed away. This wasn't just about a house. It was about preserving something precious that Katherine had forgotten to value. Perhaps if I could save the house, there might still be hope for saving my relationship with my daughter, too. With renewed determination, I laid out my clothes for the next day and prepared an envelope with all the necessary documents. I would need to be at the courthouse early to register as a bidder. "Give me strength, Will," I whispered as I finally returned to bed. "Tomorrow, I fight for our home." The county courthouse was busier than I expected on the morning of the auction. Various foreclosure properties were being sold that day, and different groups of people clustered around the hallway checking listings and talking in low voices. I spotted several professional-looking individuals with briefcases who were clearly regular auction attendees, probably representing investment companies or developers. I arrived an hour early to register and receive my bidding paddle number 23. Then I found a seat at the back of the auction room, partially hidden behind a column. I wore a simple navy pantsuit that I'd had for years, nothing that would draw attention. My hair was pulled back in its usual bun, and I wore minimal makeup. I wanted to observe Katherine and Marcus before they noticed me. They arrived about 15 minutes before the auction was scheduled to begin, both dressed impeccably. Katherine wore a cream-colored designer suit that probably cost more than 3 months of my rent, while Marcus was in a tailored, charcoal gray suit with a bright blue tie. They looked confident, shaking hands with several people as they made their way to seats near the front. The auctioneer, a balding man with a rapid-fire speaking style, began promptly at 10. The first few properties were small parcels of land and a commercial building that sold quickly. I watched Katherine and Marcus carefully noting how they paid little attention to these sales, occasionally checking their phones or whispering to each other. When lot number 7 was announced, they both straightened in their seats. "Next up, residential property at 42 Maple Street," the auctioneer called out. 3-bedroom colonial on 0.4 acres. Opening bid at $200,000. My heart raced as a screen displayed photos of our family home. The white exterior with black shutters, the brick pathway leading to the front door that William had laid himself, the mature oak trees now reaching well above the roofline. It looked slightly different with the blue front door the new owners had painted, but it was unmistakably our home. A few paddles went up immediately at the opening bid. Katherine and Marcus waited, watching the initial bidding. The price climbed steadily: $225,000, $250,000, $275,000. At $300,000, several bidders dropped out. Soon it was down to Katherine and an older gentleman in a tweed jacket. They traded bids back and forth, pushing the price to $350,000. The man hesitated at Katherine's bid of $360,000, then reluctantly raised his paddle for $370,000. Katherine turned to him with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. $380,000, she called out firmly, then added in a voice just loud enough for nearby bidders to hear. "You might as well stop now. Say goodbye to your house." The man lowered his paddle with a defeated look. The auctioneer began his chant. $380,000 going once. I raised my paddle. $400,000, I said clearly. Katherine's head whipped around her eyes, scanning the room until they found me. The color drained from her face as recognition dawned. Marcus followed her gaze, his expression changing from confusion to anger when he saw me. $400,000 from paddle number 23. 3. The auctioneer confirmed. "Do I hear 410,000? Marcus recovered first, nudging Katherine. She raised her paddle mechanically. 410,000. 420,000. I countered immediately. The room had grown quieter, the other attendees sensing the drama unfolding. Catherine and I locked eyes across the room as the bidding continued. 430,000, 450,000, 475,000. At 500,000, Marcus leaned over to whisper urgently in Catherine's ear. She shook her head and raised her paddle again. 525,000. I didn't hesitate. 550,000. Catherine's composure was slipping. She conferred with Marcus again, their whispers becoming heated. The property's market value was around 600,000 in good condition, but the foreclosure status and rumors about structural issues, which I now knew were false, had kept most serious buyers away. 575,000, Catherine called, her voice slightly unsteady. 600,000, I responded. A murmur went through the crowd. We had exceeded the expected selling price. Marcus was now openly arguing with Catherine, gesturing emphatically. She appeared torn, glancing between him and me. 600,000 going once, the auctioneer called. Going twice? 625,000, Catherine said, her voice barely audible. I took a deep breath. This was higher than I had hoped to go, but I still had margin. 650,000. Catherine looked at Marcus, who was now shaking his head vehemently. I could see the panic in her eyes as she realized they might have reached their limit. She bit her lip, then raised her paddle again. 660,000. 675,000, I countered. The auctioneer looked between us eagerly. This was likely the most dramatic bidding war he'd seen in some time. 675,000 going once. Catherine and Marcus were having a furious whispered argument. He seemed to be telling her to stop while she appeared determined to continue. Going twice. Catherine raised her paddle with a shaking hand. 700,000. Her voice cracked slightly. I stood up slowly, making sure everyone in the room could see me clearly. $750,000, I said firmly. Cash. A collective gasp went through the room. Catherine's face was now completely ashen. Marcus had his head in his hands. 750,000 cash offer, the auctioneer repeated, barely containing his excitement. Going once, going twice. Sold to paddle number 23. 3. As the gavel came down, I felt a strange mixture of triumph and sadness. I had won back our family home, but at what cost to my relationship with my daughter? Catherine stared at me with a mixture of shock, anger, and something else I couldn't quite identify. Perhaps it was the first glimmer of understanding. I made my way to the front of the room to complete the paperwork and arrange for payment. As I passed Catherine and Marcus, I heard him hissing at her. How could you let this happen? Do you know how much trouble we're in now? Catherine didn't respond to him. Instead, she watched me with wide eyes as I approached the auctioneer's table and removed from my handbag the cashier's checks I had prepared. I signed the necessary documents with a steady hand, officially reclaiming the place where our family's story had unfolded. When I turned around, Catherine was standing alone, Marcus having stormed out of the room. She looked younger, suddenly vulnerable in a way I hadn't seen since she was a teenager. I walked over to her, my heart pounding. We need to talk, I said quietly. Not here. Meet me at Riverside Cafe in an hour. Without waiting for her response, I left to complete the remaining paperwork. The battle was won, but the war for my daughter's soul was just beginning. The Riverside Cafe was a quiet place on a Tuesday afternoon, with just a few patrons scattered at tables near the windows overlooking the Charles River. I chose a booth at the back for privacy and ordered a pot of Earl Grey tea while I waited, unsure if Catherine would even show up. 20 minutes later, she walked in still wearing her cream suit, but looking considerably less polished than she had at the auction. Her hair was slightly disheveled, as if she'd been running her hands through it, and her eyes were red-rimmed. She slid into the booth across from me without greeting. Why? She asked, simply, her voice hoarse. I poured tea into 2 cups before answering. Why did I buy the house, or why did I outbid you specifically, Tunt? Both. Catherine's hands remained in her lap, ignoring the tea I'd pushed toward her. I bought the house because it means something to me beyond its monetary value. Because your father and I built our lives there. Because it's where you grew up. I paused, meeting her eyes. And I outbid you because I couldn't bear the thought of you tearing it down to build luxury townhouses no one in the neighborhood can afford. Catherine flinched. How did you know about that? I overheard you and Marcus discussing it at your office building. I know about your arrangement with the bank employee, too. Her eyes widened in alarm. Are you going to report us? The fact that this was her first concern rather than feeling remorse spoke volumes. No, Catherine. I'm not going to report my own daughter for auction fraud, though perhaps I should. She seemed to relax slightly, reaching for the tea at last. But we do need to talk about what you've become, I continued. The Catherine I raised would never have participated in the kind of business practices you and Marcus engage in. Business is business, Mom. The real estate market isn't for the faint of heart. There's a difference between being tough and being unethical, spreading false rumors about structural problems with the house to discourage other bidders, exploiting people in financial distress, using inside information to gain advantages at auctions. Your father would be disappointed. At the mention of her father, Catherine's facade cracked slightly. Don't bring Dad into this. He is in this, Catherine. Everything about that house has him in it. The garden he planted, the kitchen he renovated, the memories we made there as a family. And now you were ready to bulldoze all of that for profit. It's just a house, she insisted, but with less conviction than before. If it's just a house, why are you so upset that I bought it? Catherine's hands tightened around her teacup. Because we needed that property. We've already taken deposits on the townhomes. We have investors waiting for returns. So you sold properties you didn't own yet. Took people's money for homes that didn't exist. Do you realize how precarious that is, Catherine? How potentially fraudulent? Marcus said it's standard practice in development. I shook my head sadly. Marcus has been leading you down a dangerous path and you've been following willingly. Howard Barnes showed me your company's financial statements. You're overextended and over-leveraged. Catherine looked startled. How did Howard get our financials? He's on the board of First National. They've been watching your loan activities with concern. For the first time, Catherine looked genuinely worried. What happens now? With the house, I'm moving back in as soon as the paperwork is complete. As for you and Marcus, that's your situation to solve. He's furious with me, Catherine admitted, her voice small. He blames me for losing the auction. And how does that make you feel? She looked down at her hands. Like I'm only valuable to him when I'm useful. The admission hung in the air between us. I waited, giving her space to continue if she wanted to. We had a huge fight after the auction, she finally said. He said things about me, about you. He called me incompetent. Said I should have known you might show up. She looked up at me. How did you know about the auction anyway? Boston is a small town in the real estate world. Word gets around. I hesitated, then decided to be completely honest. Catherine, I need to ask you something important. Are you happy? Truly happy with the life you're living and the person you've become? She opened her mouth as if to give an automatic affirmative response, then closed it again. For several moments, she stared out the window at the river. I don't know anymore, she finally whispered. Everything moved so fast after Dad died. College, then meeting Marcus, starting the company. It all seemed so exciting at first. The money, the status, the feeling of success. And now it never stops. There's always another deal, another property, another investor to please. Marcus is always pushing for more, bigger, faster. She looked at me directly. When was the last time I felt truly happy? Probably before Dad died. The honesty in her voice gave me hope. I have a proposition for you, I said carefully. One that might help both of us. Catherine looked wary but curious. What kind of proposition? I'll buy out your investors for the townhouse project. Pay back their deposits with interest. In exchange, you agree to 3 conditions. Which are, first, you cut ties with Marcus professionally. I don't care about your personal relationship, though. I have opinions there too. But your business partnership needs to end. Catherine didn't immediately object, which told me volumes about where her marriage stood. Second, you come work with me to restore the house. Not just cosmetically, but structurally where needed. We do it right, honoring your father's craftsmanship. She hesitated. And the third condition. Once the house is restored, we decide together what happens next. Maybe I live there, maybe we sell it to a family who will love it, maybe something else entirely. But we make that decision together based on values beyond just profit. Katherine was quiet for a long time, stirring her tea absently. Why would you help me after what I tried to do, after how I've treated you these past few years? Because you're my daughter. Because I believe the person your father and I raised is still in there somewhere underneath all of Marcus's influence and the pressure of the lifestyle you've chosen. And what if you're wrong? What if that person is gone? I reached across the table and took her hand. Then I'll have tried my best and I can live with that. Tears welled in Katherine's eyes. I don't deserve your help. Probably not, I agreed with a small smile. But family isn't about getting what we deserve. It's about getting what we need, even when we don't recognize it ourselves. A tear slipped down her cheek. I don't know if I can leave Marcus. The company is so intertwined with our marriage. You don't have to decide everything today. Think about my offer. Take some time to consider what you really want for your future. Katherine nodded slowly. I need to think. As we prepared to leave the cafe, Katherine paused. Mom, how did you get $750,000 in cash? I thought you were struggling financially. I smiled slightly. I lived simply by choice, not necessity. Your father always believed in having resources set aside for emergencies. Saving our family home from being demolished qualified in my book. For the first time that day, Katherine's lips curved in a genuine smile. He would have agreed with you. I know, I said softly. He's probably cheering from somewhere right now. As we parted outside the cafe, Katherine surprised me with a quick, awkward hug. I'll call you tomorrow, she promised. I watched her walk away, a mixture of hope and caution in my heart. The house was saved, but the real restoration project was just beginning. 6 months passed in a whirlwind of changes. The first happened faster than I expected. Just 3 days after our meeting at the cafe, Katherine called to tell me she'd moved out of the penthouse apartment she shared with Marcus and was staying at a hotel. He's been having an affair with our office manager, she said, her voice surprisingly steady. Apparently, it's been going on for over a year. Everyone knew except me. I offered her my spare bedroom, but she declined, saying she needed some space to think. A week later, she filed for divorce and resigned from Hartwell Ross Group. Marcus retaliated by freezing their joint accounts, but Katherine had been smart enough to transfer her personal savings to a separate account first. The divorce proceedings were messy and bitter. Marcus contested everything, especially when he learned about our plans for the house. Katherine discovered that he had engaged in even shadier business practices than she'd known about, including falsifying documents for investors. With the help of a good attorney, she managed to disentangle herself from the business while providing evidence of his misconduct to the appropriate authorities. Meanwhile, I moved back into our family home. The first night was emotional sleeping in the master bedroom where William and I had spent so many years. The house needed work but had good bones, just as it always had. The previous owners had maintained it reasonably well despite their financial troubles. 2 months after our meeting at the cafe, Katherine showed up at the front door with 2 suitcases and a tentative smile. Is that spare room still available? She moved into her old bedroom, now stripped of the teenage posters and decorations. We established a careful routine around each other, both aware of the fragility of our reconciliation. Some days were easier than others. We argued about small things and avoided talking about bigger ones at first. But gradually, as we worked on the house together, we began to rebuild our relationship as well. Katherine's business acumen proved valuable as we planned the restoration. She created spreadsheets for budgeting, researched contractors, and negotiated better prices on materials. I contributed my knowledge of the house's history and original features, insisting on preserving elements that had meaning beyond their functional value. Dad built this window seat himself, I explained one day as we debated whether to replace it with a more modern design. He made it wide enough for all 3 of us to sit together and read on rainy afternoons. Katherine ran her hand over the wooden seat, worn smooth from years of use. I remember that. He used to read us The Hobbit here, 1 chapter each Sunday. We kept the window seat. The work on the house became a metaphor for the work we were doing on our relationship. Some days required tearing down walls to fix hidden damage. Other days involved carefully preserving original features while updating what needed modernizing. It was messy, exhausting, and occasionally discouraging, but the progress was undeniable. 4 months into the restoration, Katherine came to me with a proposal of her own. "I've been thinking about what to do next professionally," she said, as we shared dinner on the newly refinished back patio. "What would you think about starting a small real estate business together? Not development, but helping people find homes they can afford or helping older homeowners age in place with proper modifications?" I was surprised but intrigued. "Go on." "We could use our knowledge to actually help people, not exploit them. Focus on ethical practices, fair pricing. Maybe even create a foundation to help families facing foreclosure. Using the skills Marcus taught you for good instead of profit." Katherine smiled wryly. "Something like that. Plus the actual ethical business practices you taught me growing up." We launched Fairfield Housing Solutions the following month, working from the dining room table until we could afford a small office. Katherine handled the business side while I focused on client relations. Our first project was helping a retired couple modify their home to accommodate mobility issues so they wouldn't have to sell. As for our own house, we decided to keep it in the family. I would live there, but with legal provisions that ensured it would eventually pass to Katherine, with restrictions preventing it from being demolished or significantly altered from its original character. Today, we're hosting a small gathering in the backyard to celebrate both the completion of the major restoration work and the early success of our business. Katherine has invited some of our first clients, and I've invited old friends who knew William and me when we first moved in. The garden is in full bloom again. I replanted William's beloved roses along the fence, and Katherine surprised me by installing a small fountain as a memorial to her father. The sound of water gently splashing mingles with conversation and laughter as our guests enjoy the early evening air. I watch Katherine chatting animatedly with an elderly couple we recently helped relocate closer to their grandchildren. She looks different now than she did a year ago. Gone are the designer suits and perfect blowouts, replaced by casual clothes and a simpler hairstyle. But the most striking change is in her eyes. The hard, calculating look has disappeared, replaced by something warmer and more genuine. Later, after our guests have gone, Katherine and I sit on the front porch swing that William installed when she was just 5 years old. We gently rock back and forth, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. "Do you think Dad would be proud of what we've done?" she asks quietly. "With the house or with ourselves?" "Both, I guess." I consider the question seriously. I think he'd be prouder of what we've done with ourselves. The house is just wood and plaster. What matters is that we found our way back to being a family. Katherine leans her head on my shoulder, something she hasn't done since she was a teenager. I'm sorry it took something so dramatic for me to see what I was becoming. Sometimes we need a shock to wake us up. I'm just grateful it happened before it was too late. We sit in comfortable silence for a while longer, the porch swing creaking gently beneath us. The neighborhood is quiet, families settling in for the evening behind lit windows. "Thank you for not giving up on me, Mom," Katherine says finally, "even when I gave you every reason to." I put my arm around her shoulders. That's what love does. It doesn't give up even when things seem hopeless. It keeps believing in what's possible. As darkness falls, we head inside to the home we've reclaimed in more ways than one. Not just the physical structure, but the spirit of family and values that it represents. The journey hasn't been easy, and we still have our difficult days, but we're finding our way forward together. The greatest lesson I have learned through all of this is that sometimes the bravest form of love is the kind that stands firm against wrong choices, even when it would be easier to look away. Katherine needed someone to show her a boundary, to say, "this far and no further," before she could remember who she truly was. I've also learned that it's never too late for second chances. Not for a house, not for a career, and certainly not for a mother and daughter who lost their way. Have you ever had to stand up to someone you love to protect something important? Or given a second chance to someone who hurt you? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you found something meaningful in my story. And remember, sometimes the most valuable things in life aren't things at all, but the relationships we fight to preserve. Thank you for listening, and I wish you the courage to protect what matters most in your own life.